evening everyone. Thanks so much for continuing to watch this video. So I'm back having stitched down the further sections of the lower half of my Roxy Journal of Stitchery down the garden path, the wildflower prompt piece. So I wanted to show you where I'm up to, and then I thought we could do some beading and some embroidery and embellishment together. So to recap, we've got our upper section with our moonlit night, mountains, lake, moonlit wildflower garden, path with edging, and then this is where I've then stitched down that fringed piece of fabric, and then I've layered then the subsequent pieces down. So let me now just roll it up so you can see it. I wanted it close enough so you'd be able to see all the pieces, yep, right down to the bottom. So in this lower section, you'll see that I've kind of done it as though there's mossy rocks cascading down. I've interspersed the various fabrics so that there's not big blocks of fabric, but a sense of trees and wild things weaving across. Added some other little blooms, and then I added some further lace, just black lace, to continue that sort of that mossy rocky effect. So just be kind of open to what you need, because I added some of those things as I went along, following that similar process of stitching down what's in the background and then stitching on top, but making sure all the different surfaces get stitched down. I actually need to do a few more little stitches along the edges, but I'm also planning to use where I add the embellishments to continue those up over the edges, just so we start to blur that final edging line, if that makes sense. So let's do some beading down here, because I've started the beading, but I wanted to do some of it with you because I'm doing beads orientated two different directions. So down here I wanted to evoke, because I thought these looked like a little cluster of daffodils, and I wanted to evoke daffodils by having the beads with their holes facing up, so they're like the little trumpets. And I've chosen to use a bead that's like a luminescent cream colour, metallic-y sort of cream colour, and then to use it with an orange thread, because I had some daffodils growing last year that had almost a variegated or a stripy trumpet centre, so I wanted to evoke those. So I've got my needle and thread there, so let's just pop up here. Let's grab one of our beads. Don't know if you can see my beads. We might move those across and I'll probably knock them, and we'll have beads flying across my table, but that's okay. So I'm popping up through the fabric, I'm skewering a bead, I'm going back down through the hole that I came up, and then I'm going to come up on another, just a little bit across from it, and come up again. And then I'm going to anchor it down on the sort of opposite side from where the other bit of thread was. And then I'm going to pop up through it a third time and try and make as close to, and it doesn't have to be perfect and it won't be perfect, as close to like a peace symbol. So find the other side from where the threads are, and try and sort of, yeah, have the three there. And you want the little bead ending up poking, the center of it poking up like the open bit of the trumpet of a daffodil. So let's just finish these ones off. So while I'm doing that, I hope you have all been having a good day. Hopefully you might have already had some time to do some crafting, some stitching, some making, some creative endeavors, or hopefully you've got some planned in. Hopefully you might even be doing some now while you watch this video, because I know that's what I love to do. So if you're watching and you think you've got something on your channel that I might like to see, definitely drop me a note in the comments, and I will be sure to check it out. And I've just unthreaded my needle, which is always the way it goes. It's being a beading needle, it is quite small. Let's see if we can, I'm going to have to just chop the little end so I've got a decent end to thread with. Good, we're back on. We're back cooking with gas. So what have we done? We've done one stitch. I'm going to do a stitch on the opposite side, and hopefully not catch the tail in the, left too much tail through, pull the tail through. and then one more stitch coming back up through the bead, and then down in that little sort of peace symbol. So you've got your 3 stitches holding the bead with the hole facing up. I reckon we might just do maybe just even 2 more. I think 2 more. I had been following where the little orange dots in the fabric were, but I think you can add your own orange dots as well. That's the lovely thing when you've got fabric, it kind of gives you, I think it gives you a bit of confidence to make a start, because you're like, okay, there's a flower there, and then you can actually add your own further embellishment and imagination to it. Sometimes it's hard starting with the embroidery if you don't have something to work to. So if you are struggling a bit, you might want to find some fabric that you can embroider onto, and that just might give you that little bit of confidence to get going. Hopefully I might have to move up just some a bit more on camera. Just hope I wasn't off then. It's the perennial challenge of doing these YouTube videos, is keeping yourself on camera. Previously it used to be not knocking the stand. I've got a cut on my finger that keeps pushing in, but I thought I won't put a band-aid on my finger because that's a bit ugly for videoing. I know one of the other stitchers who I've been watching, Corinne, she stabbed herself with her needle the other day. I said I virtually do that every evening. That's sometimes why I don't actually video my stitching, because I'm worried I'm going to say a bad word when I inevitably stab myself. But I suppose that's what the edit function is for. So, oops, we'll just maybe put one more stitch into that one just to keep it facing up. And that's the thing, if it doesn't end up facing up the way you want it, just add another stitch to get there. So we're just going to sew that off on the back because I don't need that thread anymore. Just do a stitch under and then pass it through and make a little notch. And then take it off there. I'll keep the needle out, put my thread over there. And so that we don't damage those or spill those beads, I'll put those up there. So then the other type of beading that I've been doing is using these little beads that are, in fact, there's one left of that bead. I'll just pop it back in. There we go. I've been using then these other ones that are a sort of a reddy, slightly almost orangey, and I've been using a red thread with them because the background's reddish. So let's see if we can just get this thread out. Yep. So it's been a beautiful, cool day here in Melbourne today after having had some very hot weather, and it's been quite drizzly, which has been lovely for the garden. Not so good for walking the dog, although I have taken the dog out now. I think he got his, yeah, he did get his 3 walks anyway, which is his normal daily quota of walks. So he still managed to get them, but I did get yeah, drizzled upon on at least a couple of the occasions. I just need one more knot on the end of that. I probably didn't do quite enough knots. Don't want it slipping through. Okay, so with these beads we're going to position them so they're on their side. So it's the similar technique to the other, in that you pop up with a knotted needle, pick up a bead. I quite like having this quilted fabric on my work area because it makes it really easy to pick up things like beads. So we're doing 1 stitch through them, and then we're going to come up and do a 2nd stitch, which will just hold it in place on its side quite nicely. So there it is there. And if we pull that stitch back down through it and get the bead on its side. Now I'll do another one over here, I think. Hopefully I'm on camera. And pick up a little bead off the work surface, which you probably can't see, but yeah, just picking it up off where the quilt is. Sometimes you get a bead that won't actually pass through the needle, and this is one of those naughty beads. So we'll just try another one, because they're not all made exactly the same size for these particular beads. It's quite a thin needle, so I'm not sure what needle would even fit through that bead if it's not fitting through this one. Then I might do one more down here. Pick it up. Jump back down through the same hole as close as possible, and then pop up again. Pass through the needle, not through the needle, pass through the bead, and then pop back down again, and hopefully the bead will be on its side and held in position. So that's done, and again giving lovely texture. So let's just, there is a darker area in there. I might actually pop up, and I think I will put some beads there, because to me it's looking just a bit strange having no beads in there. So let's do that. Always feel free as you go with your work to evolve things as you go, and if something just doesn't look right to your eye, that is, I think I've picked up that same bead that wasn't going through the needle. That wasn't smart. I'm going to put that over there out of the way. Oh, another one. That's quite a few in this batch that aren't passing the needle. Third time lucky. Oh no, definitely not third time lucky. My goodness. Okay, this one's going. We only need 2 more, so come on. This one. And so after this, we're going to move on to, I think, the sunflower with bullion stitch, and then French knots in the middle. So that'll be a bit of fun. I love sunflowers. I didn't plant any this year because we have quite a lot of cockatoos, wild native birds here in Australia, sulphur-crested cockatoos, so white with the bright yellow crest. And we're in the outer area of Melbourne with lots of sort of farmland and forest and other things not too far away, and so big flocks of the sulphur-crested cockatoos come flying over, and they absolutely adore eating the sunflowers. But the problem is, once they're in your garden, there's a chance that they're going to eat and destroy things, and they don't come solo. Well, they might come solo to begin with, but then we found they invite their entire gang back. And there was one time, because my partner had actually taken to putting out seed for them, and he ended up one morning with, I think there was like 40 or 50, including some hanging on the aerial of the house across the way, and they were across his entire balustrade and in the garden. Although we have found since we got Travis the pup, they've been less likely to be there, but they used to come back in the early hours of the morning to raid the sunflowers. So that's our beading done, and they're sitting nicely where we want them to be sitting. So I can actually get rid of my beading needle for now, not get rid of it, put it back in the pin cushion. So let's do our bullion stitch. So for this, you want a relatively straight needle. You don't want the head of the needle to be too big, because you need to then slide all your little stitches over it. So we're just going to thread the needle. Going to knot it. So doing my knot where I wind it round, holding the thread between the needle and my thumb, and then slide the knot down to the end. I'll just get rid of that little endy bit. So the bullion stitch gives you these lovely petal-like effects, and it's basically thread wound around a length of thread. So let's continue round from the bottom here. Hopefully, yep, I'm on camera. So we're going to pop out near the centre of the sunflower where all the seedy bits would be, and we're going to take our needle back to the edge of the sunflower, and then we're going to bring the needle through back to where we started, if that makes sense. So you've taken the needle out from the centre out to the edge, but you haven't pulled the needle all the way through, and then you're going to wrap your thread around it. And I'm going to do about 18, 19 wraps, I think thereabouts. I don't know if I've done exactly that. I'm actually just doing it by eye on this occasion, because I was talking to you and not counting. Then we're going to hold it loosely, but not hold it really tight because otherwise it won't slide. And we're going to slide it down, holding onto it so that it stays, as you can see, hopefully, in its little cluster formation. And then once it's here, we're just going to give it a bit of shaping, and then we're going to take the needle back down into the fabric and anchor it down, and then just give it a little massage. Some people say they look like little worms, and depending what colour you do them, they can look like worms. I had a recent embroidered piece I was doing for the 52 flags, handmade, and mine were looking, because I used a sort of a grey whitey, they did look a little bit worm-like, but I found I solved the problem by joining them all together as an edging for a flower, and then they stopped looking like worms. And here they definitely look like petals, so it's going to be a good one to have for this particular project. So I've brought it through, and now I'm wrapping it around and around. Sometimes it's good to push it down as you go, and then you're winding it around the needle, pushing it down. That should be enough. Then you want to let it loosen a little bit and not be tight, but you want to hold it as you pull the needle through and ease it off the end of the needle, like that. And then you're going to, hopefully I might need to push a bit more up on camera like that. And then you're going to go back down through the hole at the outer side and anchor down that petal. So coming up through the center, near the center of the sunflower, near the section where the seeds would be, bringing your needle to the outer area where the outer edge of the petal would be, and then popping up near that central point, not bringing the needle all the way through the fabric, and then wrapping around your needle. And if you need to, using your fingernail and pushing it down. Now, one of the nice things about having been doing these YouTube videos is it's finally stopped me picking at my nails, which has been something I've done my entire adult life, and in fact from earlier, from when I was I guess a teenager or possibly a kid, and I've just never been able to totally stop the habit. And I know the first video I did, I was very self-conscious about my fingernails, and I thought, oh goodness, they look pretty atrocious. And so I think there must have been something in my brain that just went, okay, I'm going to cease and desist with the nail picking. And amazingly, it has stopped since I've started doing these YouTube videos. So even if I'm not enjoying the whole stitchery side of things, I think the fact that I've stopped picking at my nails is actually a really fantastic byproduct. So I might have to keep doing them anyway. But the reality is I am enjoying doing it at the moment, loving the interactions with people, and just loving the comments from people about having learnt something new or seen something new, or being really curious about the technique, albeit mine's very experimental. So I don't know what some of this stuff is called. I'm just giving stuff a go and kind of problem solving along the way as I create my works. But anyway, it's nice to have fingernails again and to be keeping them. I used to be able to sometimes stop picking at them on holidays, so I did always wonder if it was a bit of a stress relief thing for me. Picking at them was a bit of an outlet. And maybe, potentially, I don't think I'm actually doing more stitching than I used to do, although the videoing obviously takes a bit more time in the evenings. But I think maybe it was just enough to trigger me to stop a habit that I've been wanting to stop for a while now. Okay, how are we going for time? So let's just put another one in here. We should only probably need to do maybe 4 or 5. So hopefully you're not getting bored of the bullions. So we're popping up, we're wrapping around. It does take a bit when you're starting with the stitch to kind of get the hang of it, get the gist of it. It doesn't kind of make intuitive sense when you start off how it's all going to work. But yeah, it's a really good one for creating texture, and I think it really does give that lovely petal effect. And don't worry if it seems to be getting a bit scrunched, as long as it's sliding through the thread, you're fine. And then when you stitch it back into your piece, you'll find that you can just sort of smooth it to where you want it to be. So let's do the next one. I need to just turn myself a bit around. Pop up through the centre, near the centre. Do the wrapping. Wrap, 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 wrap. Good to have a good length of thread for this, not enough that it gets tangled, but because you're getting quite a bit of thread use, and there's nothing more than annoying at the end when your thread's getting quite short and it's hard to wrap around without it slipping out of the needle. I was getting rid of some of my small bits of thread before when I was doing this one, but it was quite frustrating having to keep changing the thread as I ran through it. Popping back into the fabric where the other stitch is. Okay. And then the next one, same thing. So I don't know how many of you are doing the Roxy Journal of Stitchery, but we're those of us taking part in it are eagerly awaiting our next prompt tonight, although usually the videos go up quite late, so I'm not sure whether I'll get to see it tonight. But it's good to have this piece quite progressed. I'm actually amazed how much territory I've covered with it already and the size of it, so I'm not even sure if it is going to ultimately in the 6-month project fit on the top of the handle of my basket. I'm actually wondering if it's going to have to be a hanging down from the stairwell, because I think it could end up being quite a sizable length, but we will wait and see. That's a good thing. I don't have to decide for now. I just keep stitching and see where we end up. It's got a little loose one at the end, so I'm just going to shape it a smidge. There we go. Hopefully I wasn't off camera there. I need to smooth this a smidge closer. So up at the centre, round from the edge. And they don't have to be like perfectly even in terms of spacing, because when you think about flowers, they end up having their own positioning depending on the stage they're at in their opening or sort of dying off, where the wind's blown them. Little creatures sometimes nibble at them, so it's not about trying to get everything perfect. Because nature does have a lot of perfection in it and a lot of patterns, but then it also has the interaction with other things in nature and randomness as well. So it's been great to just see all the different interpretations of the wildflower prompt as well, and the different approaches people are using for it. It's just such an inspiring project and such an inspiring group, both the people that are making videos on here, but also all the work that we get to see in the Facebook group and also on Instagram. Oops. Just threading my needle that became unthreaded. Going to pop down there, pop, oops. Pop out near the centre. Nope. There we go. I think this will be the last one I can get done with this piece of thread, which means I'm going to have to rethread just for the last petal, but never mind. So I'll just need to stitch that off. Like that. Putting a notch in and then just stitching back under to be sure that it's all stitched down. Okay, and then let's grab one more piece. Actually, I can use one of my smaller ones that I was using before, because I think we've only got one more petal to go. And then we'll do some French knots. And then, as I mentioned, I think I'll continue to do other stitching on it, but I might wait for the next prompt so that I can see how I might be joining this piece to the next one, or whether I'm going to do the next one on a separate piece and then possibly have other ones join in between them. Haven't worked that out yet. Yeah, that almost didn't need that final petal, but I will put it in. Where am I putting it over here? Yeah, I think I'll put it over here perhaps. And then round. So once you get into these bullion knots, you'll probably find they're quite relaxing to do, because there's a lot of winding. And they do seem a bit slow, but once you get going, they do build up when you're just doing like little ones like this single thread width. You can also do them with wool, and then they're quite large. So yeah, I think we'll call that a day for our sunflowers. Knot it there. Okay, so I'm going to keep using the same needle for the bullion, not for the bullion, for the French knots. So you can see I've done a whole bunch of white French knots, and I did that using a perle or pearl. This one says just pearl, but sometimes they're written P-E-R-L-E. So this is just an Anchor pearl cotton. I got a box of variegated pearl cottons from Anchor on Amazon recently, because I was wanting to add to my variegated collection. They feel a bit coarser than the Wonderfeel ones. The Wonderfeel ones feel a bit nicer. These feel a little bit coarser, but it was quite reasonable to sew with here, and I've actually got the thread for that at the back here. So I'm just gonna, oops, that white thread has got somewhat caught in there. That's not a smart idea at all. So I think I'm gonna have to just chop that off there. I probably shouldn't have left them on the back, but I did, but that's okay. Let's just get that out of there. I'll properly seal that one off when I'm done in a moment. But we've got one more white one to do there, so we can do that together. I was thinking I was going to avoid those threads that are left on the back, but no, it's too hard to do that. So you're always better to finish off your thread and restart when you need to. Oops. This one's also harder to thread because it seems just a little, yeah, that coarseness to it just makes it a little bit harder to fit through. Oops. Don't need too many rounds because it is coarser to make my knot. Oops. And the knot just slipped off, I think, so we'll just, oh no, it's there still. We'll just tie one more though. Right, so with the French knots we pop up through the fabric, we then wind, and you can do this one to many times, because as many times as you want, but because this is a relatively thick cotton, I'm just doing one wrap around and then holding onto the cotton and pulling it down on itself and creating a little knot. So these are the French knots. So popping up through the fabric, wrapping the cotton around my needle once, popping the needle back into the fabric, and then pulling it on through. Hopefully my red one's not wrapped up there. And so you can do them as close or as far apart as you want them. I want to still possibly have a little bit of the background fabric showing, so I don't want to go too close, although you can kind of vary it a little bit as well, because as I said, all the plants have that natural variation in them. So just get a few done there. And with these, as I mentioned, I continued the French knots up over the border of the fabric, just to unify the piece and not have that fabric edge sort of pronounceable or in focus. Okay. Just pulling through. So we're eagerly on the countdown to a holiday that we've got coming up in February, heading to Alpine, Victoria, to one of our favourite places, Bright. And it's one of those places that's just beautiful all year round. So in summer we enjoy swims in the river, and just, yeah, enjoying the mountain views. We like to go in winter. My partner likes to go skiing, but I just enjoy doing bushwalks and other things with Travis the dog. And now here's something that's happened. We've ended up with a little loop because it didn't sort of go through the way it was meant to. You could try and undo that, but instead I'm actually just going to incorporate it into the design. I'm going to bring my needle back up. I'm going to twist this one around, if I can. Let's see how I go, or otherwise I'll just put a stitch in and then possibly pop up one more time and just make it look like a knot. So yeah, I reckon it just needs one more stitch up through it. Just put my needle through it and twist it over on itself. Let's do it this way. Put my needle through, twist it over, and then it creates what looks just like a French knot, so you can hide any little mistakes quite easily. So main thing is to hold the fabric so you don't end up with that loopiness, but as I say, it doesn't really create any harm. So yeah, just continuing it up over the edge, as I mentioned. Spider just ran across my tiny little spider just ran across my workstation. Right, so that's the white ones there, beautiful and bobbly. So we might actually, while we're here, might sew down this, and we'll sew down that other thread. And I might even just tie them off, and then that gets rid of the problem. Probably would be easier if I was tying them off without the needle involved, but I might just actually add one more stitch over the top to be sure. I had the safety pin there because I actually originally had these spare threads up attached to that, but they obviously became loose. But with the French knots, generally things stay in the fabric anyway. So we're now going to use the red, and this is the Wonderful variegated red. So it's got sort of, no, it wasn't that. I think no, it was actually this one, wasn't it? Yep, this one. Because the other one's got more orangey, browny purples in it. So yeah, it was this one here, which is EZM 1009. But I really love the Wonderful variegated, so I think I will add to my collection. But I was lucky when I first got them. I got them on special and from a lady on Etsy. I think she's called Bittern, Bittern, by the Bug. And yeah, they were for a very good price, and so I got a good mixed selection of them. So what we're doing over here is we're just adding little French knots to this red area here. I was just, again, because it's the thicker perle or perle, I was just doing a single loop over for that. And I'm leaving some gap between them because I do want to be able to see the red shaded area behind them. So I'm not sure what, possibly these could be little foxgloves. I think that's what the white ones possibly are meant to be. Definitely have had those in my garden growing quite wild as well. I'll just stab myself. At least I'm working on a red area, so if it bleeds, no, it's not bleeding. This needle's not super sharp, just enough to give a little twinge. And thankfully I didn't swear, so I don't have to edit the video. Okay, so I reckon we are almost there. Oh, the other thing I did was little French knots just with regular brown thread in the centre of the sunflower, so we might just quickly do those before we finish up. I'm going to do a couple more. Oops, and I've got another, oh no, the loop came out, which was good, and then I'll just do another one up along where the border is, holding the thread so it doesn't go loopy, and maybe one more up here. And maybe one more down here. And don't throw out all your little end bits of thread either, because they can be great for adding texture, like making a sort of a shrubby bush if you stitch them all down, or a little nest maybe, who knows, we might get a bird prompt later on. So I just tend to keep them all. I have a jar, I think they're called orts, those leftover thready bits. So I have a jar of orts. Or are they orts because you ought to use them, or I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Take that off, and then we'll quickly show you. So I was just using a very just a regular embroidery floss, and just taking, I think I did use just one strand of it to do the centers of my sunflowers, because I want this to look like those small little sunflower seeds, which are almost sometimes black, but in this particular depiction they're brown. Okay, so we're just going to do the same thing. So it's just the French knot, but with these I actually did 3 wraps around the needle and then popped back on in and then popped out. And again, if these end up being a bit curly, whirly, twirly and not tight in, which they might be because you are doing those 3 loops, it's fine, because you can, if you need to, you can just stitch them down a little bit, but you want them to sort of very quickly fill up the space, and that's what having the 3 twists will help you to do. You could even do more. See, I'll do 4 there and it won't matter. So I'm just going to keep moving around. So I might even do, oops, try not to wrap the wrong bit of thread. And then pulling those down, just keep going around. So I'd love to know if you've got a sewing, embroidery, slow stitching channel or some videos. I would love if you could mention in the comments, because I'm always looking for videos to watch while I'm stitching and crafting myself in the evenings. I've worked my way through all of the videos of the fellow folks who are doing the Roxy Journal of Stitchery, and I've just managed to catch the end of my thread there. There we go, we can pull it out. So yeah, keen for some more viewing pleasure. I think a few folks have actually posted videos today which I haven't had the chance to watch, so once I finish this video I'll enjoy watching those while I await the next prompt and clean up my work table and get ready to get inspired and creative with that next prompt. So there we go. I think maybe just one more over here, and that will be enough to give the effect of the center. So I'm doing about 4 wraps now. So it's not a precise arch. I might just do one more over near the edge. Always want to do one more. Something about this sewing caper, you always want to do one more. Find it hard at night. I just don't want to go to bed because I'm having just such fun creating. But then I've got to remember it's not a school night, but I call it a school night. Got to get up for work. Well, I have to say, working from home definitely has its benefits in terms of not having that big commute. I still go into work periodically, but not super regularly, which is great. So there we go. I can take that safety pin out later. Here is our bottom section of our Roxy Journal of Stitchery. Down the garden path and our wildflower. So this is our sunlit wildflower garden, and so we've got beads facing with their sides. We've got beads with their little hole bits facing out. We've got 2 sunflowers with seedy bits in the middle. We've got some foxglove and some other blooms. We've got more of those French knots also over there. There's another knot called colonial knot, but I've just chosen to use French knots because they're the one that just kind of was, I think it was one of the first ones I learnt, so they've always stuck in my head, and they're just the one I naturally defer to, and I like their effect on the fabric. So there we go. That's our Moonlit wildflower garden. So thank you so much for bearing with me. Thank you to those that have watched from the start. I think we're now up to part 3, part 4. I've lost track, but you'll be able to see in the title of this which one it is. And that will be it for this piece, although who knows, I might keep, because it's all going to be one continuous piece anyway, I might keep adding to it over time. So thank you so much, and take care, and hope to see you on here soon. Bye everyone.